You were told that education is the great equalizer. Study hard, get perfect grades, get into a good school, and your life will be set. But here's what they didn't tell you. Rich kids and poor kids both go to college. They both get degrees, but only one group gets wealthy. And it has nothing to do with intelligence. Let me explain something most people never realize. When a rich kid goes to college, they're not there to learn. They're there to signal and connect. When a poor kid goes to college, they're there to earn credentials, to prove their worth, to compete. Same campus, same classes, completely different games. The rich kid goes to Yale. Why? Not because Yale teaches better economics, but because Yale is a network, a signal, a key to certain rooms. While they're there, they meet other rich kids. They join the same clubs, they go to the same parties, they summer in the same places. And 5 years later, when one of them has a job opening, who do they call? Their roommate from Yale, not the kid with a 4.0 from a state school they've never met. The degree itself is just a ticket, a marker that says, I'm one of you. But the poor kid, they're told education is about merit, about knowledge, about working harder than everyone else. So they do. They get perfect grades, they graduate with honors, they optimize for achievement, and then they send out 200 job applications, and they get 5 interviews. Meanwhile, the rich kid with a 2.5 GPA gets hired, not because they're smarter, but because their dad knows the CEO. Does that sound fair? It's not. But fairness isn't the point. The system was never designed to be fair. It was designed to reproduce itself. Here's what makes this particularly cruel. This wasn't always true. In the 1950s and 60s, a college degree actually was a path to upward mobility. If you were working class and you got a degree, you could genuinely climb into the middle class, sometimes even higher. Why? Because degrees were rare. Only about 10% of Americans had them. So a degree was a genuine differentiator. It signaled something real. But then something changed. More people went to college. By the 1990s, nearly 30% of Americans had degrees. Today, it's over 40%. Degrees became common. And when everyone has the same credential, the credential loses its value. Think of it like currency. If everyone suddenly has $1 million, $1 million isn't worth much anymore. So what happened? The rich adapted. They didn't abandon education. They just changed what they were using it for. They stopped optimizing for grades and started optimizing for networks. Meanwhile, poor kids were still being told, just get good grades, that's all that matters. And that advice became a trap. Let me show you exactly how this plays out. 2 students, both smart, both hardworking, both go to good schools. Student A comes from wealth. Their parents are doctors, lawyers, business owners. They grow up in a neighborhood where everyone is educated and connected. Student B comes from a working class family, first generation college. Their parents work hourly jobs. Both students go to college, both graduate. Now watch what happens. Student A's college experience, they join clubs, they go to networking events, but not the public ones, the private dinners, the alumni gatherings, small groups where the same 20 people show up repeatedly. They study abroad junior year. Why? Not for education, for the experience, for the stories they can tell, for the friends they make who will be working in London or Singapore in 5 years. They do internships, not because they need the money, but because their parents' friends offer them. Unpaid internships at prestigious firms, internships that look good on a resume, internships where they meet more connected people. By the time they graduate, they don't need to apply for jobs. Jobs find them. A family friend calls, a former professor recommends them. They get hired without competing. Student B's college experience. They work part-time while studying. They can't afford to study abroad. They can't take unpaid internships because they need to eat. They focus on grades because they're told that's what matters. They graduate with honors. And then they start applying for jobs, online, through job boards, where they're competing with thousands of other people. They get a few interviews. They're nervous. They don't know how to signal belonging. They don't have the right references. They eventually get hired, but for less money, at a less prestigious company with fewer growth opportunities. 10 years later, student A is a VP somewhere. Not because they were smarter, not because they worked harder, but because they were playing a different game from the beginning. Student B is still mid-level, still competent, still working hard, still wondering why effort doesn't translate to results. This is the credential trap. You were told credentials matter, and they do, but only to get you in the door. What actually matters, what separates the people who build wealth from the people who stay employees, is network access. And network access isn't taught, it's inherited. Here's the part that nobody explains. Rich kids learn an invisible curriculum, not in classrooms, but at dinner tables, at country clubs, at family gatherings. They learn how to talk to powerful people, how to make small talk, how to signal credibility, how to ask for things without seeming desperate. They learn that relationships are investments, that you help people now, so they help you later. That business is about trust, and trust is built over time through repeated interactions. They learn which brands signal status, which schools are respected, which phrases to use and which to avoid, how to dress, how to carry themselves. This is called cultural capital, and it's more valuable than anything taught in a classroom. Poor kids don't learn this, not because they're less intelligent, but because they're not in the rooms where it's taught. So when they finally get into those rooms, through scholarships, through hard work, through sheer determination, they're marked as outsiders immediately. They don't know the codes. They don't know the signals. And because of that, they're not trusted. They're not given opportunities. They're not brought into the inner circle. And here's the cruelest part. They don't even know what they're missing. They think they're failing because they're not smart enough, not talented enough, not working hard enough. But that's not it. They're failing because they're playing the wrong game. Now let me tell you why this system is so stable. You'd think poor people would figure this out. You'd think they'd realize the game is rigged and demand change. But they don't. Why? Because the system gives them just enough hope to keep trying. Every year, a few poor kids do make it. They get into Harvard, they get good jobs, they build successful careers. And the system points to them and says, see, anyone can make it. The system works. But what the system doesn't tell you is that these are exceptions, outliers, lottery winners. For every one poor kid who makes it, there are thousands who don't, who work just as hard, who are just as smart, but who don't have the network, don't have the connections, don't have the invisible advantages. And because we only see the success stories, we think the system is fair. We think education is the equalizer, but it's not. Education has become a sorting mechanism, a way to separate people who already have advantages from people who don't. Rich kids use education to access networks. Poor kids use education to prove they're worthy, and the system benefits from this confusion. Because as long as poor people think education is the solution, they won't question the structure. They'll keep working harder, keep believing that next time, if they just try harder, they'll succeed. And the system stays exactly as it is. So here's what most people don't want to hear. Your degree doesn't make you wealthy. Your network does. Your grades don't open doors. Introductions do. Your knowledge doesn't create opportunities. Access does. And access is gatekept, not through official rules, but through invisible barriers, cultural codes, social signals, repeated interactions in high-trust environments. The people who understand this don't talk about it, because talking about it threatens their advantage. Instead, they promote the myth of meritocracy. They say, I worked hard, I earned this. And they did work hard. But they also had advantages they don't mention. They had parents who knew how the game worked. They had introductions. They had safety nets. But admitting that would mean admitting the system isn't fair. And if the system isn't fair, then maybe their success isn't fully deserved. So they stay quiet. They let poor people believe that education is enough, that credentials are enough, that working hard is enough. And the system reproduces itself, generation after generation. Rich kids learn the invisible curriculum. Poor kids collect credentials. The gap widens. And everyone pretends it's about merit. So what does this mean? It means the credential trap is real. Degrees don't equal wealth anymore. They equal access to entry-level competition. Wealth comes from network access, from being in rooms where opportunities are distributed before they become public, from knowing people who can make one phone call and change your trajectory. In those rooms, you don't get into them through grades. You get into them through connections, through introductions, through being part of the right circles from the beginning. The system doesn't fail. It functions exactly as designed. It just wasn't designed for everyone to win. It was designed to look fair while preserving advantage. And as long as people believe in the credential myth, it will keep working. You can collect every degree, every certification, every credential. But if you're not in the right rooms, none of it matters. The game was never about what you know. It was always about who knows you.